Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Lori, and in this community, we aim to educate, to motivate, and to inspire each other in all things travel related. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the Cayman Islands. If you have not been here before and you have not checked out my Cayman Islands vlog, make sure that you check it out after you have watched this video, of course. So first things first, well, we were trying to get to Jamaica this year. I've been trying to get to Jamaica for the past 2 years, but if you've been watching my TikTok, if you've not, I'll just put a QR code here that you can scan and join me over there. But if you've been watching my TikTok or my shorts, I have been talking about these travel advisories, right? And so I wanted to go to Jamaica. That did not work out. My friend had a milestone birthday and she went along with me to the Caymans, but we were looking at Jamaica. We were looking at one of our favorite places because we both went to the Bahamas for the first time together, and the Bahamas was her first international trip. So it holds a very special place in both of our hearts. And so we were thinking of the Bahamas, but the Bahamas also had I think a level 2 travel advisory, and there were some questionable things happening the last time we visited there. 2 years ago, I think it was. And so we were just like, we need to give that a break. We really need to give that a break. And so we were looking for someplace warm. We were looking for the Caribbean. I hadn't been in the Caribbean Sea for a minute because my last international trip was to London. And so it was colder and rainy and all of that. So I wanted someplace warm. I wanted the water. I wanted the people, the vibes, the food, everything that felt like homey. So this trip was planned 2 weeks before we went there. And so we ended up booking with a boutique hotel. We stayed at the local hotel. And I really, if I had my preference, I would have stayed at the #1 rated hotel where we ate at Tilly's in that vlog, if you saw that. It was very expensive, but it was very expensive for a reason. And I found out a couple of things about the Cayman Islands, after, being there for the first time. And so I figured I would share those things with you guys. Some of them were quite encouraging, but yes, I would go back. I definitely would go back. I loved it. I loved it. The people were friendly. The food was amazing. Oh my gosh, the food was so amazing. It was so good. So I'm giving you some spoilers already, but the food was amazing. The people were super nice. I definitely have that on my list now as one of my favorite places. It felt a whole lot like Turks and Caicos to me. And when I was doing my research and looking at some of the other videos of people who had been there, the way they described it, they didn't say it felt like Turks and Caicos, but the way they described it, it sounded to me like when I spent my week in Turks and Caicos a few years ago. And it was quite familiar that way because of the similarities in the cost of living, the similarities in the people and the culture and the food, and also the similarities in the safety, the safety element, because I did a week in the Turks and Caicos solo, and I felt safe to walk around at 11 o'clock at night by myself in the streets and get into taxis and cabs by myself and just chat it up with the locals. And, I felt completely comfortable to do that, and wearing my designer, shoes and bags and clothes and all of that. I felt the same way comfortable. I didn't know that Turks and Caicos was like that before I went, but I found out that the Caymans, I checked out their international score for safety, and I saw that they were like super, super safe, almost zero crime, and it's a higher level of living, so it's not as if I'm the only one walking around with designer goods on. I had a great time. If you haven't checked out the vlog again, I'm going to make another plug for you to check it out. So let's go ahead and get into this segment of the video where I talk to you a little bit more in detail about some of the things you should know before you go. Grand Cayman, along with its sister islands Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, comprise the Caribbean nation known as the Cayman Islands, a British overseas territory and the largest by population. This is cruise day. So I figured the best way to do this would be to give you some additional footage that I'd taken of our trip to the island and explain things along the way. Okay, 2 until 2 o'clock. All right, let's go. Took a private taxi to the museum, Cayman Island National Museum. So the first tip that I want to give you, and the first thing that you should know, is that the Cayman Islands has a very robust economy. It is a very modern Caribbean island. It's not like some of the other islands that are kind of like developing countries that you may find. So the American dollar is actually weaker than the Caymanian dollar. It's about a 0.8 to 1 exchange. And even though I retrieved money from the ATM in Caymanian dollars, I had a whole lot of money to spend and try to use up before I came back to the US, which was kind of a waste because everywhere I think the people treated us fairly, even in the taxis. They made sure that if they told us the fare in Caymanian dollars and they told us in US dollars, it was actually exactly equivalent to the current exchange rate. So I would recommend not to change your cash over, just to use US if that's what you have. $12.80, 16 US. So as you can see, the price for 2 tickets to the National Museum in Georgetown was exactly equivalent either in US or in Caymanian dollars as told to us by the representative at the window. So as we toured the museum, we had about an hour until it closed, and it was small enough that you could do it within an hour. But I mean, we did a speed tour, a self-guided speed tour. So as we walk you through our speed tour of the museum, I'll give you some more tips that you should know about the island. Now, if you're like me, if you're of a particular age, you may have heard some of the commercials about the Cayman Islands from back in the past. Cayman Islands, just a few know of us, but those who know us love us. We're the Cayman Islands. Well, I haven't heard any of those commercials in quite some time, and I think I have discovered the reasons why. First, the population has grown tremendously in the last decade or so. And they are trying, I think, to control that by not having way too many people come to the island and not having an overcrowding situation and not having a crime situation or anything like that. The other reason is there is no national export to the Cayman Islands. You may have heard that the Cayman Islands is a very, very green island. It's a very flat island, not very much of an elevation to the island. Now, of course, the Cayman Islands are known for their beauty, their location in the Caribbean Sea, yet they're just a really short direct flight from many places within the US. I remember growing up in New York City and knowing that a lot of the more affluent people had summer homes in the Caymans. So a lot of people go there for scuba diving. A lot of people go there for undersea diving and snorkeling and such. And so in this area of the museum, for instance, you see some of what you will see under the water. So like the underwater habitat, the beaches are beautiful. One thing you should know is that the beaches are public only in certain places, and I showed you that in the vlog. Most of the beaches are owned by the resorts that are located on the beach. One thing you may have also heard about the Cayman Islands is that it is known as a tax haven, and it was very, I guess, infamous for being a tax haven for very shady businesses and business people. However, it has in recent years taken on a new campaign to refurbish its reputation worldwide. Now back to what you're seeing of our museum tour. These are some of the living things that you will find on the island or that were found at one time or another on the island. A lot of people come to the island to pet the stingrays, although the national symbol for the island is the sea turtle. Of the museum to the second level, I must note I did not see any signs for an elevator in this museum. So you should know that there may be some accessibility issues if you do need an elevator to get to the upper level or the lower level of the museum. This exhibit demonstrates and explains how for hundreds of years shipbuilding, turtling, and roping were the primary industries of the Cayman Islands. Whereas now, as I spoke with someone at the airport before I left, finance is the number one industry. He said finance, finance, and finance when I asked about the top three industries. And of course, he was in finance, specifically the banking industry. So yes, shipbuilding, roping, and turtling. Another thing we learned about the Cayman Islands through this exhibit and through our walkthrough is about how life used to be, how the people used to look, and the importance of the Bowdoin name. We saw Bowdoin around a lot. There is even a town called Bowdoin Town. Here you will see some pictures of the people. You will get to hear a little bit of the accent.
I received my commission from the Commonwealth Office in London on the 3rd day of January 1963. I was sworn in as the first female nominated member of the Assembly. I served for 22 years. I fought to keep Sundays and Good Fridays as holy days. I could not agree to any entertainment of any kind on those days.
Now, this is interesting what Annie Bowdoin is saying because it made a lot of sense to us. This was a Saturday that we were in Georgetown, the capital of the Cayman Islands, and the museum was closing at 2. Most restaurants were closed. Most shops were closed. The popular day to go to the clubs were Friday because most were not even open on Saturday, and the clubs were free, by the way, so you should know that before you go. But even they said only one supermarket is allowed to be open on Sundays. Sunday is truly held as a day of worship, and it begins very early on Saturday that they begin to prepare for that day of worship. I had one thing to say to the person with whom I spoke at the airport, and that was that there didn't seem to be a very distinct accent. There didn't seem to be a very distinct culture, I guess because of its geography in the Caribbean Sea and its proximity to so many different other islands that have very strong cultures, for instance, Cuba and Jamaica, and how the people have such a mixed look to them. The foods are very mixed, all of it. And I showed you a little bit of the breakdown. I'll show you here again a breakdown of the nationalities of the people of these islands.
If I could offer this country any advice as a wise old lone woman, let me speak from my heart to you as I did to the Queen. Don't plunge heedlessly and believe everything that we are told. Let us think for ourselves in order that the generations who follow us will have the same opinion about us.
Yeah, the accent is a mixture of like all the different accents I've heard. I said the accent is a mixture of all the different accents. It sounds Bayesian. It sounds a hint of Jamaican. It sounds a bit of Guyanese. If I heard somebody Caymanian speaking in New York, I wouldn't be able to tell you where they're from.
You should also note that the minimum drinking age is 16. Alcohol is very expensive by the drink or by the bottle. In the 7 Mile Beach area where we stayed, in the nightclubs, the alcohol was inexpensive, maybe about $6 a drink, as opposed to at the restaurants that were tourist driven, drinks were about $20 for a mixed drink or even a glass of wine. So the cost of living is very high. We learned that housing is very expensive in that area, and also that the minimum wage is $6 an hour. That was a little bit depressing when we learned that on Saturday. We had just learned that at brunch Saturday morning, and it kind of put a damper on the rest of the day
because everything has to be imported. They're not growing the majority of the foods there. They're all imported. A 4-pack of butter is about $4.85. So the people there are paying a lot of money. Even though the foods aren't taxed, the income isn't taxed, there is a high price for everything that you pay for on that island. And so you have to take this into consideration and, just plan accordingly when you visit. One way you can plan to save some money is to take the public bus instead of the taxis. Now, the taxi ride, a 15-minute taxi ride, can cost you about 20 to 25 US during the day. During the nights, the prices may be a little bit higher because there are less taxis available. The public bus is not like a traditional bus as you would think. It is basically a minivan, and they make multiple stops, but there is public bus printed on the front bumper so that you can identify them apart from private vehicles. The cost for the public bus, the ride is usually $2 per person. That's $2 US per person, which is very economical compared to $25. Yet another thing you should know before you go is that there are no casinos and gambling is not allowed. So do not expect to see any casinos where you can spend your time. The cruise ships are not even allowed to open their casinos when they are docked in the Cayman Islands. Overall, we notice, at least in 7 Mile Beach and Georgetown and Camana Bay, where we visited, the island was very clean. The beaches were pristine. There seems to not be a littering problem on the island. There seems to not be a homelessness problem in that area. I think perhaps if there is one, they may be keeping it away from the tourists area. And also, there doesn't seem to be a rodent problem or an insect problem. Even mosquitoes, I didn't notice a lot of mosquitoes while we were there. Maybe 1 or 2 here and there, but just a very, very pretty and very clean and pristine island. We felt very safe there, walking at nights, being out among the locals, going into the local establishment. We prefer to mingle with the locals when we travel, and we felt very safe there. I think the murder for 2023 was maybe 2 or 4 murders, which when you think of it, it's like ridiculously low. However, when you think of it in context to the total number of population, it actually ranks very close to the US as far as murder numbers per capita. There are 100,000 people. Now for the last part of our museum tour, where we visit an old jail. Yes, we're gonna go down to the jail.
It could have been a jail or a leper's house.
What? So they threw people with leprosy in here to contain them.
I wonder who these people were.
Or if they were said to have leprosy, like how people were said to have to be witches and stuff. It was interesting and a little depressing. Yeah, I'll have to do a little bit more research, because I bet you there are exhibits and storytellers and artifacts and such that document the lives of slaves in this country. I don't believe it's been all peachy keen and jam.
So, what did you think? That's all the tips I have for you. That's all the tricks and the hacks and the little bits of details that I think will help you out if you're going to the Caymans. If there are any Caymanians watching, or if you've been to the Caymans and you think I've left out something pertinent, then Remember, this is a teaching and learning community, and so we're sharing with each other. So I hope that you will share down in the comments. Let me know what I've left out, what I've omitted, so that the rest of the community can benefit from this as well. As always, remember to value experiences over things, because travel is one of the very few things you buy that truly makes you richer. Ciao.